Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com or, of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview film professionals to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by VFX supervisors Matt Whelan and Eric Durst, whose work includes 5 Days at Memorial for Apple TV Plus, among many other great films and TV shows. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good to be here.
Now, my first question is I have to ask you guys about your education, because Matt, you went to Sheridan, and you Eric, you studied under Engels, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so what I'm wondering is, whenever I talk to like students, they're always, excited about what they're learning, what have you. But I'm always interested in knowing, like, was there something you didn't learn while you were there that you wish you had known or had learned before you got into the industry?
Well, I think, well, first of all, just to give credit for what I did learn, and I think Matt and I share this because we have sort of animation backgrounds, is that animation and understanding how timing and just how to portray movement and life in the frame with the simplest of tools, even just a line drawing, is something that is foundational for like everything. So that was the main thing I took away from my education. I think the thing that I didn't know about, which I don't think you can ever know about, is just how the business works and just how networking and how knowing people and just how everything sort of builds. It's like this giant fabric of relationships that you have, as well as the work itself. It's a combination of lots of things. So I think that's something you only learn through experience. So maybe that's something you can't learn.
Interesting. What about yourself, Matt?
Yeah, well, I was actually just going to kind of laud the same aspects of my education that Eric brought up there. And it is funny that we have that in common, that we both come from kind of a background of classical animation, as it were. And one of the things I think that's helped me a ton in my education is being able to draw. So being able to do things really quickly, storyboard, animate, all those types of things, because we work in a visual medium. And so I think it's the slowest way to learn to communicate, but it's also probably the most useful once you get a handle on it. The thing I wish I had learned that I didn't was probably that things are going to be okay. I think I was very tense about the industry and how to succeed when I was younger. And, I was looking for ways to succeed that almost become pathological towards your actual goal, because you're worried so much about things. And at the end of the day, if you just work hard and get good at your craft, everything else kind of works out, because, as Eric pointed out, you meet the right people and you work in the industry and you become somebody who they expect good work from. And it really does stand for itself.
So do you guys, because I know that you guys have both directed in some capacity, do you guys make little animations on the side for fun, or do you just use it for work now?
I do. I mean, I use it for work a lot, probably more than just making films itself. I used to do a lot of that. But now I just, there's so much work going on right now that pretty much consumes a lot of it. And, you influence things you bring to a shot or bring to a series that you're working on, or a movie. Those aspects that you would do, maybe you would apply to a short film that you're doing. So you try to influence in a certain way. And that's sort of how I use those skills.
So how did you guys? Oh, sorry, Matt.
Oh, no, no problem. I was just going to agree with Eric again, 100%. It's like there's no time to do that as much anymore now that there's so much work to do. But all that work of making films and commercials and all those things feed into all the aspects and understanding of filmmaking for visual effects.
Now, I was going to ask, how did you guys get involved with 5 Days at Memorial, and what were your roles when you initially got on board?
I can start. I got a phone call from ABC and Paul Rabwin, and who's somebody I had known for a long time. And he asked if I'd be interested in interviewing for the job. And so I did that. And I'll just preemptively say that Matt and I were both interviewing for this job, and fortunately they hired both of us, which was incredible. And it really worked out beautifully. And I would, one of the issues in a television series is that it's maybe it's not enough work for two, but it's work for like 1.5, but it's too much for one. So actually, Matt and I have all these different skill sets that I think blended well together. Matt is incredible visualizer of things. You can have a conversation amongst people and he will show you something and say, is it like this? And he'll show you an illustration or drawing or a 3D animation that coalesces everything you talked about. So he's just brilliant at that. So it was wonderful for us to have that partnership.
Yeah, and I got a call, I can't remember, through the producer who was early on the show, and she, I worked with her on American Gods. We interviewed, as Eric said, and Eric got the top spot, and I was brought on kind of as a second visual effects supervisor. I felt really lucky to be on the show at all, to be honest, like with the pedigree that we were involved with. I think, as Eric said, we just had a really great kind of cohesion working together. I ended up doing a lot of the previs when we all worked on it as a team, but I would have the hands-on with the computer, as he was mentioning, and Eric kind of finished the show for months and months after when I stepped off. So all the finality and all the detail as well as all the historical accuracy up front, being involved in all those conversations. Eric's something of a historian, and it really helped us understand. It really helped me understand the project as a whole, to go back and look at things with his eye a little bit.
I'm going to interrupt this interview for 1 second. We want to thank PixelView, one of our sponsors. They're a streaming solution for filmmakers. PixelView lets you stream your work to remote clients for easy collaboration, and it works with both on-set teams and post-production teams. With built-in video chat, you can discuss and make changes in real time and stream directly from your editing software. Or you can use the hardware encoder to stream from DaVinci Resolve or the camera on set. See the promo code and the link in the video description below. I guess because when I was doing research for this, there was a lot of practical effects, and there's sort of a mix between like digital and practical. So how did you guys as a team figure out this is what's going to be practical and this is what's going to be digital?
I think a lot of that was with Matt's pre-visualization, and Matt, you can speak to that, because water was the big problem. It's like, how do we do water? We got water everywhere. And a lot of it was going to be digital, but water, especially with actors, waiting around in it, is you want to do it with real water. So there'd be obviously a tank of some kind. But Matt, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, it was just a big physical, pragmatic problem that we had to overcome. So we had these long shots. John and Carlton are both very austere filmmakers. So we end up with these long one-er shots. The biggest one is probably the opening of the show, where the investigators are moving along in the boats. And we just had to figure out pragmatically how to achieve that in a tank. We had a huge tank that was about 150 by 250 feet that we built out in Hamilton, and it held 9 million liters of water, some incredible amount. You could feel the pressure when you were inside it, and we could literally lift trucks and put them in and out via crane. The big thing was just to figure out how to stitch together so that one long shot is actually 3 shots. And Eric and I did a lot of work to try to figure out what we could get away with and how to plan it in a way that we used every inch of that tank. And then we discussed with Carlton and John how we could move, and Ramsey, our DP as well, who was amazing, how we could move the camera in a way that would allow us to hand off between the cuts and stitch it back together seamlessly. Eric has a lot of experience stitching shots, which I was kind of new at, and it was a really cool thing to learn.
I do have a small comment. one of my favorite things about the film industry is watching or seeing how people come up with solutions to problems. So like, and it's usually like the craziest solution. Like, we need to create a flood. How do we do that? And that's always fun to hear how people do that. So what made stitching things together so difficult?
Well, I think a lot of it is that the A and the B parts, or the A, B, and C parts, or A, B, C, D parts, they all have to match in a certain degree, a certain area. I mean, you can cheat it, you can move it around, but you have to have sort of a semblance of these matching. So I think working with actors and making sure that they're in the relatively same place, if you're going to stitch two shots together to make it look like one seamless shot. You have to replace backgrounds. There are a lot of different things you have to do, but the closer you can come to matching those two pieces as they overlay, the better off you are. So it's a lot of it's a battle of trying to get that to exist.
Now, was there a particular scene? And I'm wondering if both of you have a particular scene that you found challenging, but you're really happy with the outcomes of it.
Matt, you want to talk about the levee break?
Oh yeah. Well, no, for me it would be that opening shot.
Oh yeah, the opening, yeah. Right.
Yeah, the opening one, just because it's that one that we did stitch together, and it's the first shot we talked about on the show, and the first shot that was previs, and it ended up being one of the last things we shot just because of the logistics of building the tank and COVID and a bunch of other problems along the way. But it just ended up as the shot that you couldn't do. It's just one of those shots that really added to the scope of the movie, I felt, but also it was unachievable because we don't have hundreds of feet of flooded New Orleans around us. We were on a backlot essentially in Hamilton in a tank that was constructed. And I think it's just, to me, it's just such movie magic to see what we shot versus what we got.
And for those who can't see it or haven't seen it yet, it's basically this long shot where they're the fan boats of these people who are coming, investigators who are coming to the hospital. So they're coming basically from the city and showing all the debris and damage that's gone on in the neighborhood, and then they go off, and then you see the hospital in the distance, and they start to get towards the hospital. So it had all these different aspects of damaged New Orleans, and we only had a certain number of set pieces, and we were trying to utilize as many as possible. So there were a lot of different elements and factors in that.
Well, how about yourself, Eric? Is there a particular scene or shot that you struggled with, but you were really happy with the outcome?
Well, I think we'll go to the giant levee break in the lower ninth ward. It's like we did a lot of research in terms of how levees break. And I thought it was like a wall and it just sort of like explodes, like something you would expect in a big science fiction movie, although this wasn't science fiction. But what happens actually is that, let me get an example here, is that the water goes over the wall itself, and it goes into the surface underneath, and it compromises the foundation. So after a while, if there's so much pressure, it just flops over. So all these walls are made of sections, and it goes flop, 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 flop like that. And what the intensity of it and the damage of it, the problem of it is that it forms a giant amount of water instantaneously. So that's what happened in the lower ninth ward, along with other places, but especially in that area. So it just took out like a tidal wave all these structures and houses and everything that were very closely knit together and close to the levee wall itself. So we did a lot of research of what that was going to be. Stormborn, who's the great visual effects company in Vancouver who specializes in water effects and simulation effects like this, did a brilliant job. It took them, Matt has the stats on it, but they're astronomical in terms of how much time it took to do it all in the computer. So it was a really blend of research of what happened because it was never photographed. No one was there waiting for it to happen, and any security camera or anything like that actually demonstrated what the events were. So we had to figure a lot of that out, excuse me, and then visualize it. And because it's photoreal and there's water and it's just like billions of elements that went into that shot. So it was a progressive shot that we knew would take a long time. It took, I think, 9 months to create.
Okay,
Yeah, the
so
stat
I
that's
was going to just say I have to ask you what the stat was now.
no, I was just looking it up because I was curious myself, but they were at 3,084 hours, so 128 days to render it, and it was 649
That's just a
frames.
rendering of the
Yeah, I
computer,
was just going to say,
not the
yeah.
work. Yeah.
So what happens if the render fails, or like, or you get to the end and you're like, you know what, we got to go back and re-render this because we want to change these things.
Well, we did it a few times, so
Yeah.
Wow,
It's an
jeez.
issue.
So
It's one of those shots that's the first one you want to start and the last one that you're going to get.
well, it's interesting because what you were talking about with the levees and how they break. You sort of mentioned like in a big sci-fi film or something, we would do sort of over the top, it breaks. How do you as a team decide what has to follow, reality in a sense, or we have to do the research and make sure that this levee breaks the way a levee actually breaks, versus something that you can take more liberties with and say, okay, well, let's create something that's visually more compelling?
Well, I think it's about timing, a lot of it, because events, let's say catastrophic events, oftentimes, first of all, we had to be very respectful of what happened down there and just the phenomenal terror that occurred. But you also have to tell that story. You have to coalesce it in one shot and tell it in like 15 seconds. So the event itself probably took, much longer, but you have to speed it up in a realistic way so you tell that story and rather than just sitting there waiting for it to happen over a period of, I don't know, minutes. So that's one of the things that you have to cheat, I guess, if that's the right word, or you have to be very efficient about. And also in that shot, we wanted to have an emotional sense of it. So it starts where we're flying over as if you were in a television helicopter, just documenting what was going on. So you see it in the distance if you're in a helicopter, but we wanted an emotional content of it as well, not just looking at it objectively and seeing everything from afar, because that's usually what happens in aerial photography. So we started with it, and this was Carlton's idea, which I thought was brilliant because it really did seam the emotional content in, is as the levee breaks, you start to get closer to it, and as if you get a little bit too close and you get swept up in the water, and you start, all of a sudden you're watching it as an objective point of view, and then it's subjective. Then you're right in it, and you're going to die. You're in the middle of the water, being flung around, and then in the end, you go under the water. So we really wanted those components to occur in that shot, and I think it worked out really well.
Now, is there, I asked you what was one of the more challenging shots, but is there a shot that you really just enjoyed doing, that you really liked the outcome of, or you really like just the way it looks or the way it plays out? Like you were just talking about the way the water sort of pulls us along in that scene.
Well, I think in terms of just joy of seeing how it all comes together, we had this giant tank like Matt was talking about, and just El Ranchito did a lot of just brilliant work on extending the water and building the hospital. Of course, we couldn't build the entire hospital. We built like 2 floors of it, but there are a lot of wider shots that take the physical tank and the water and then extend it out seamlessly. So I really like transparent effects, and I think Matt does as well. We all do, where the biggest compliment is people don't even know you were there. So if someone says, "Oh, we had 2,000 shots in this series," and they say, "I didn't see any of them," so that's the biggest compliment. It's sort of this weird compliment that you get.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I think we really felt that the goal of the visual effects in this series was to get out of the way to allow the audience to connect with the people. And it's very much a supportive role that we played on this one. So the hope is nobody notices them and you're just sad for the events that took place.
Now, I have one last question for you guys. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Eric, you want me to go first?
Sure. I've got my answer, but go ahead.
Okay. I was mine is Stand By Me. No matter what, that's what I am a sucker for coming of age films, and if that's ever on TV, I'm gonna sit down and watch it. It's just so well crafted and hits me where it resonates.
How about yourself, Eric?
On a different spectrum, I really like P.T. Anderson's Magnolia. I think it's a really interesting film. It's just all these different characters that blend together. Probably Tom Cruise's best part, I think, actually, craziest part. And it's just, I like how insane that is. And so I always watch that. I think that's a fabulous film. There are lots of them, but that's one that comes to mind.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today, guys.
Thanks for
having us. Thank you so much.
And that's it for and that's it for today. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com or of course on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.